It is absolutely interesting times in America, and I think that because we're coming up to elections, not all the time, it's not going to become a permanent fixture. We are more a British based political channel. But I think it's very often good to very often turn our gaze from our lovely, sceptred isle to countries other than ourselves, and have a look, because a lot of people will go on and say and look at the craziness going on in America and say, "Oof, that could never happen here." Unfortunately, yes, it could indeed happen here. There are again, there are especially a good number of examples when we've covered Brexit of similar things happening, and especially you've got the examples of the Conservative Party taking a lot of leaps of doing exactly what the Republicans are doing. And one of the things, especially we need to watch out for, is that electoral commission. Make sure that they don't scrap it. Like I say, please do remember to write to your MP about that. And it does bode very, very worrying, because we need to be careful and watch what happens, because we need to stop similar things happening. And our biggest option is to really, we need to get rid of the Tories as soon as humanly possible. But unfortunately, that ain't going to be happening anytime soon. We can only hope that we get rid of them, and then eventually we can just undo the damage that they're about to do. And I've always said this very, very loud and clear. From January next year, you will probably see the true agenda of what the Tories are going to do, because finally they can do all their dream projects, all the stuff that they've dreamed about for years, and they have a majority. So no party can actually stop them. The only way we can actually stop them, first of all, protests, but also significantly, even if your MP is a Tory, write to them and tell them your displeasure about whatever it is currently that they're about to do, and state very explicitly that if it continues, or if they decide that not to continue doing that, that you will basically not vote for them at the next election. This will scare the bejesus out of them. But today's story comes from the Jacobin, and I think again this bears worth going over, because of what has been going on in America for quite some time. The right over there seems to have basically disappeared into an almost alternate reality. And this is just as worrying, because a lot of Brexiteers and themselves believe in an alternate reality when it comes to Brexit and the way that they think and talk about it. So there are some parallels between what's going on there in America and what's going on here. But anyway, the title of the article is From QAnon to Kyle Rittenhouse, the right is sinking deeper into an alternate reality. So on August 19th, President Donald Trump gave the nod of approval to believers that in the QAnon conspiracy theory, which maintains that the president is secretly fighting to save the world from an elite satanic paedophile network, calling them the people that love our country. 1 week later, on the 26th of August, Fox News host Tucker Carlson sympathized with Kyle Rittenhouse, a teenager who killed 2 Wisconsin Black Lives Matter protesters and maimed another. Carlson suggested that Rittenhouse felt he, quote, had to maintain order when no one else would. At a glance, these provocations might appear disconnected, but they are deeply intertwined. In the span of a week, Trump and Carlson both gave the green light to extremist elements on the right, QAnon conspiracy theorists on one hand, and an armed pro-police adventurists on the other. In the process, they each drew on the same bedrock narrative, that the streets of America, especially Democrat-run cities, but nowhere is safe, and are teeming with lawless agents of anarchy who flout authority, terrorize innocents, and threaten civilization itself. Thus besieged, the right-wing extremism on one variant or another is not really extreme at all. It is rational and even heroic and patriotic. Trump played dumb about QAnon, though of course he's familiar with it. Most news-literate Americans know now the broad outlines. And Trump watches more news than anybody, not to mention he's fascinated by anything starring himself, which QAnon does. But even as he attempted to downplay both his awareness of QAnon and its fundamental lunacy, he also played up to the idea that he and his administration are defending the world from total destruction at the hands of the shadowy evildoers, which is at the heart of QAnon. So, this is something that Trump said about them. Trump: I don't know much about the movement other than I understand that they like me very much, which I appreciate, but I don't know much about the movement. I haven't heard that it's getting more popularity. These are people that don't like seeing what's going on in places like Portland and places like Chicago and New York and other cities and states. And I've heard that these are people that love our country and that they just don't like seeing it. I don't know anything about it other than that supposedly like me, and that they would also like to see problems in these areas, especially areas that we're talking about, go away, because there's no reason Democrats can't run a city. And if they can't, we'll send in all the federal, whether it's troops or law enforcement, whatever they'd like, we send them in and we'll straighten out their problems in 24 hours or less. And then the reporter asked him this question: the crux of the theory is this belief that you are secretly saving the world from a satanic cult of paedophiles and cannibals. Does this sound like something you are behind? Trump: well, I haven't heard that, but it is that I suppose to be a bad thing or a good thing. If I can help save the world from problems, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to put myself out there. And we're actually saving the world from radical left that will destroy this country. And when this country is gone, the rest of the world will follow. You know, sometimes I admit I screw up when I'm doing these live readings. But I'll tell you what, trying to read what Trump said here was just incredibly difficult. Anyway, it continues. Naturally, QAnon supporters did not interpret these remarks as a repudiation of their worldview, but instead took it as encouragement that they're on the right track. Emboldened, they held rallies and branded innocuous protest against child trafficking, with participants wearing Child Lives Matter t-shirts in dozens of cities across the country. Last Saturday, just days after Trump's comments. Fox News host Tucker Carlson has also studiously avoided QAnon. It's not his style, but he has aggressively promoted the bedrock narrative of the nebulous but mounting chaos designed by those who continuously seek to dismantle society and carry out their unwitting liberal foot soldiers. When the second wave of Black Lives protests began, Carlson spoke about them in ominous terms, characterizing them as indiscriminately violent and charging them as they constituted a form of tyranny and posed a threat to every American. Those comments are consistent with Carlson's usual oratory, which gives the overall impression that hordes of enemy invaders, from Central American immigrants to politically correct college students, are perpetually breaching the castle walls. Carlson's comments on the actions of Rittenhouse, who crossed state lines with an assault weapon to assist police with crowd control, as he put it, to protect the citizens, are perfectly indicative of Carlson's rhetoric over the course of protests. Like Trump, Carlson implied that police should have been more aggressive with people protesting the Kenosha, Wisconsin police shooting of Jacob Black. Anyway, I think this is a quote from Carlson. Kenosha has devolved into anarchy, not because authorities in charge of the city abandoned it. People in charge of the governor on the down refused to enforce the law. They stood back and they watched Kenosha burn. And are we really surprised about the looting and arson accelerated to murder? How shocked are we that a 17-year-old with rifle decided they had to maintain order when no one else would? This continues. Police were already being aggressive. They used ample amounts of tear gas on protesters and even welcomed the assistance of armed civilians who they perceived to be on their side. The Kenosha police chief's blaming of protesters for Rittenhouse actions and the Kenosha sheriff's recent recent resurfaced comments from 2018 in which he recommends locking black shoplifters and their garbage people up in warehouses until they perish and completely disappear do not suggest a law enforcement top brass likely to accommodate Black Lives Matter protesters. But the Carlson image wants to portray it as a meticulously negative government that does nothing to protect the innocent people, while the world teeters on the precipice at the precipice. Yeah, while the world teeters on a precipice. Sorry, I think it's just Trump getting to me there. Millions of people have been listening to Carlson and company doomsayers and exaggerating threats like this for years. Many of them have been compelled by comments like this and the mythology they build to scour the internet in fear to scour the internet in fear. And more than a handful have navigated their way into the world of conspiracy theories and reactionary extremism, which both encourage vigilantism. After a while, stewing in their own hatred and horror, their sense of reality warping and fraying, a number of people evidently decide to take matters into their own hands. Some chase random civilians they mistake for paedophile kidnappers with their car, or hatch plots to raid foster homes. Others patrol protesters against racial injustice with AR-15s, not merely supporting, but in their minds, personally becoming the thin blue line between civilization and chaos. These ideas are dangerous. In Rittenhouse's case, they resulted in 2 deaths. In order to combat them, we are going to need to understand why they are gaining purchase. The truth is, the world is coming apart at the seams. For decades, the stability in many Americans' lives has been undermined by policies and processes that grow profits for a handful of rich people and shield them from paying taxes. The constant social transformation is epidemic to capitalism, but this process is accelerated and intensified by neoliberalism, which meets a weak opposition as it promotes austerity and privatization, thus removing sources of stability without much pressure to replace them with anything at all. The result of the last half century has been increasingly violent and alienation, almost a universal feeling of dislocation. Working class people bear the brunt of the material process that set into motion this kind of disintegration. But everybody inhabits this world together, and everybody, no matter how rich or poor, is susceptible to these conditions to feeling untethered and paranoid, albeit by the rapid expansion of revolutionary models of digital communication and information access. This mutual sense of confusion and suspicion of each other for the future, it manifests itself in increasingly strange ways. The coronavirus pandemic and the economic shutdown are the epitome of this era so far. Millions are unemployed, nearly 200,000 are dead, and normal life, which didn't feel very normal to begin with, has ground to a halt. Everything else especially feels surreal and sinister. At no time in living memory has reality itself been so contested. So it's no wonder that the QAnon conspiracy theory has begun to rapidly radicalize people and score political victories during this peculiar time. Consider the case of Alpha Simon, who first encountered QAnon this summer and within a few weeks was live streaming a high-speed police chase with his wife and children in the car, begging for Trump and Q to intervene on his behalf. Likewise, it's not surprising that this Black Lives Matter protest wave has intervened far more internet-inspired vigilantism than the last one did, including the presence of the Boogaloo Boys, who fall halfway between QAnon and Rittenhouse. Part wild-eyed apocalyptic conspiracy theorist and part heavily armed right-wing survivalists. Meanwhile, Rittenhouse is being overtly celebrated as a hero by digital neo-Nazis, some deadly serious, others primarily interested in, quote, triggering the libs, also a hobby of Rittenhouse, and many suspended in between whose ranks are swelling in this age of entropy. The special instability and surreality of the pandemic is accelerating a kind of collective psychosis in a segment of the American right. This unraveling is being activated and encouraged by the mainstream right-wing leaders, who, like caregivers with Munchausen syndrome, by proxy are making their charges sick to keep them near. As a result, a small but rapidly growing contingent believe that Trump is fighting a Satanist, paedophile, deep state Jewish cabal of Illuminati cabal. Meanwhile, a vastly large number of people also believe a sanitized version of this story, which forces the law and order are holding at bay those of BLM and Antifa and Democrat, immigrant, and transgender Marxist darkness. Or rather, they're attempting to hold it at bay, but they need assistance, and with the proud and brave will willingly provide. Now, none of this is inevitable. These mass delusions are contingent and rooted in economic, political, and cultural processes, because they're contingent and they can't be abated if we set into motion a new processes, ones that will design and encourage stability and solidarity instead of volatility and violence. But it's easier said than done, because the right at present faces no serious opposition from the left, only a hapless centre that has no real alternative political vision for which it seeks to build hegemony, and those whose strategy for electoral dominance is to passively absorb refugees from an increasingly unhinged right. Until a real left opposition emerges to confront the right, Carlson and Trump and whoever emerges in their wake will keep Americans dreaming of apocalypse and dying to stop it, and dreaming of glory and killing to attain it. And I sort of agree with her there. You can't really not disagree, and it's honestly, it's very, very worrying in America. And, you know, I do sooner or later I think you're going to see a lot more violent actions from right-wing protesters in America. Unfortunately, it's inevitable given the fact that they're being continuously pumped up. But this is nothing really new. I mean, you go back to the 2000s, and there was the guy who ended up killing his father because he'd been listening to Alex Jones constantly and believed that the government was coming to get him. These, and again, go back to some of my very first videos where we're talking about conspiracy theories, and the web and cocoon they build around themselves is truly terrifying. Like, you cannot reach these people. One of the reasons why I don't respond to people in comments is because I had years of responding to conspiracy theories in comments, and I'll tell you what, it takes the will out of you to respond to people in comments. It really does. Because I had people who promoted this theory, and I went, no, actually, it doesn't work like that. Here's this from this website and this, articulate, very good source that shows that you are wrong. Only for them to respond, well, clearly that's just a CIA plan operation, and it's just like, and conspiracy theories do exist in the UK. Yeah, I've had my run-in with them. What was it now? Critical Mass Radio, a conspiracy news radio station based out of Manchester. A few years ago, I covered one of their protesters about cloud seeding and chemtrails, and I just pointed out to them, nothing that you're saying has any basis in logical fact. If you picked up a simple geography book, you'd get the information you'd need. And there was a whole back and forth between me and this radio guy, and it was insane because he had people on who, if their theory was true, people in Arizona wouldn't be able to breathe because of the amount of air, metal, and we're talking metal that would be so big you'd be able to see it. But it's insane. These people believe in a bizarre alternate reality, and it's sometimes you just can't wake them up. But you can sometimes. There were a few people who came to me who were ex-conspiracy theorists, and they said themselves, and they got themselves out of it. So it can be done, but I think it takes a lot of time and dedication. And trust me, it's time and dedication and patience as well on top of that to get people out of it. So thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe, like, share and subscribe. It does help out the channel lots. There are links down below should you like to support the channel otherwise. And with that, please do. We'll see you all next time.